It wasn't the blood dripping from her temple that made Amara's hands shake, it was the way the doctor looked at her, as if she were less than human. "You people are always causing trouble," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for the whole triage unit to hear. The room went still. A nurse froze mid-step, glancing from the doctor to the girl on the bed, unsure whether to intervene. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile, almost judgmental glow over every wrinkle in the doctor's frown. Amara's mother, Vanessa, clenched her jaw. She had walked into this ER countless times before, not as a patient, but as a board member of the hospital's largest philanthropic foundation. She had shaken hands with surgeons, spoken at charity galas, and signed checks that kept this place running. But tonight, she wasn't here in a gown and pearls. She was here as a black mother watching a stranger demean her injured child. "Excuse me." Vanessa's voice was low, dangerous. The Dr. Dr. Hensley, according to his ID badge, barely glanced at her. "I said, we've seen a lot of cases like this. Teenagers getting into fights, playing the victim afterward. You should be more careful where you hang out." His eyes slid over Amara as if she were a case file, not a person. Amara wanted to speak, to tell him she had been shoved into the street by a drunk driver while walking home from track practice. But her throat felt tight. Not from fear she had faced worse on school buses and sidewalks, but from the crushing weight of realizing that here, in the place meant to heal, she was being diagnosed by the color of her skin. A nurse with a clipboard stepped forward, nervously. "Doctor," maybe Hensley cut her off. "Let's get her registered as self-pay, unless she's got insurance." His tone carried the kind of condescension reserved for people you've already decided aren't worth helping. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. She could have revealed her identity right, then could have watched his smug face collapse in real time, but something in her told her to wait. Let him dig his own grave. Hours earlier, Amara had been running. The autumn air was crisp, the kind of cold that bites your lungs, but makes your legs feel like steel springs. She loved running after school, pounding the pavement until the day's stress fell away. But tonight, the street lamps seemed dimmer, the shadows longer. She was half a mile from home when she heard tires screech. She turned just in time to see headlights lunging toward her. Instinct took over. She leapt sideways, but not fast enough. A side mirror clipped her head, and the world tilted. Asphalt. Pain. A voice slurring an apology before peeling away into the dark. When she stumbled home bleeding, Vanessa didn't waste time. She grabbed her keys and drove her daughter straight to the hospital she had spent years helping flourish. She never imagined that inside those glass doors, her daughter's biggest injury wouldn't be from the accident. Back in the ER, Dr. Hensley began his examination without a word of comfort. He prodded Amara's scalp brusquely, making her wince. "Probably just a mild concussion," he said. "If you don't want the CT scan because of cost, we can skip it." Vanessa's patience thinned. "Order the scan," she said. Hensley looked at her with the kind of smirk that assumes you can't pay for what you're asking. "Sure, but it's not cheap." The nurse's eyes darted between them, sensing a storm. Vanessa took a deep breath. She could unleash her influence now, but she wanted him to see her first not as a name on a plaque, but as a mother one he had just insulted. "Doctor," she said evenly, "you've made a lot of assumptions about my daughter. Do you make medical decisions based on those, or on evidence?" He raised an eyebrow. "Experience tells me." "Experience," she cut in. "Or prejudice?" For the first time, the doctor hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. "Ma'am, if you're going to accuse me of something, I suggest you take it up with administration." Vanessa's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Oh," she said, "I will." The nurse's knuckles tightened on her clipboard. She had worked under Dr. Hensley for years and knew his reputation: brilliant diagnostician, quick hands in surgery, but an arrogance that sometimes curdled into cruelty. She had seen him talk down to patients before, but something about this moment felt different. The air in the ER was heavy, charged, like a storm gathering just off the coast. Amara swallowed hard. "Mom, can we just go somewhere else?" she whispered. Vanessa brushed a hand over her daughter's hair, a gentle gesture that hid her own roiling anger. "We're not going anywhere," she said softly but firmly. "Not until you get the care you deserve." Dr. Hensley checked his watch as if they were wasting his time. "I'll have someone prep the CT," he muttered, walking toward the nurse's station. When he was out of earshot, the nurse leaned closer to Vanessa. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "He can be like that. Not that it's an excuse. Vanessa's eyes softened for the first time since arriving. Thank you. What's your name? Emily. Emily, thank you for speaking up. And don't worry, this won't be forgotten. The CT scan came back showing a small but stable bleed, nothing requiring surgery, but enough to warrant observation. Dr. Hensley delivered the results without any trace of empathy. You'll need to keep her here overnight for monitoring, he said. We can arrange a room. Unless you'd prefer to take her home and save yourself the expense. Vanessa stared at him. The expense. As if that was the deciding factor. As if every decision she made was filtered through the lens of affordability instead of care. We'll stay, she said simply. Fine. He scribbled notes on the chart, then handed it to Emily without looking up. Put her in 314B. It's empty. Emily hesitated. Doctor, it's fine, Hensley snapped, walking away. Vanessa caught the hesitation. What's wrong with 314B? Emily bit her lip. It's not the best room. Older wing. Most of our VICU patients with private insurance seating go there. Vanessa smiled coldly. Perfect. Upstairs, the hallway to 314B smelled faintly of bleach and neglect. The paint on the walls was chipped, and the overhead lights flickered like tired eyes. Amara sank onto the bed, still dazed, while Vanessa stood at the window, staring at the parking lot far below. Mom, Amara said, you're mad. I'm furious, Vanessa corrected. Because he's a jerk? Vanessa turned, meeting her daughter's eyes. Because he saw your skin before he saw your injury. Because he decided who you were before you even spoke. And because this isn't the first time I've seen him do it. Amara blinked. You know him? Not personally, but I've heard stories from staff. I just didn't want to believe them. Amara lay back, staring at the ceiling. So what are you going to do? Vanessa's lips curved. I'm going to let him hang himself with his own rope. And then I'm going to pull it. Later that night, while Amara dozed, Vanessa stepped into the hallway and made a phone call. Eleanor, she said when the line picked up. It's Vanessa Wright. I need you to do something for me. Eleanor Davis was the hospital's chief operating officer and one of Vanessa's oldest friends. They'd served on the same charity boards, fought for the same policy changes, and shared more late-night strategy sessions than either could count. What happened? Eleanor's voice sharpened instantly. Vanessa told her every word, every sneer, every assumption. By the time she finished, Eleanor's tone was low and controlled. Stay put, she said. I'll be there first thing in the morning. And Vanessa, I'm so sorry. The next morning, Dr. Hensley came in during rounds. He was brisk, clinical, rattling off discharge criteria without a glance at Amara's face. If the headache worsens or she starts vomiting, bring her back. Otherwise, follow up with your primary care physician. You can check out at the front desk. Vanessa didn't move. You're discharging her already? Her vitals are stable. There's no medical reason to keep her. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to stay longer, though I wouldn't recommend it for cost reasons. That was the final straw. Vanessa rose slowly, deliberately. Dr. Hensley, she said, do you know who I am? He gave a faint smirk. Should I? I'm Vanessa Wright. My family's foundation has donated over $12 million to this hospital in the past decade. We built the pediatric wing. We fund your trauma center. And as of this morning, she glanced toward the doorway, where Eleanor now stood flanked by two members of hospital administration. We're launching a formal review into your conduct. For the first time since meeting him, Hensley's expression faltered. Eleanor stepped forward. Dr. Hensley, you're relieved of duty pending investigation. Security will escort you out. The color drained from his face. This is ridiculous. No, Eleanor said firmly. What's ridiculous is a physician treating patients based on prejudice instead of need. As security approached, Hensley's gaze darted between Vanessa and Eleanor. But Vanessa's eyes were steady, unyielding. Goodbye, doctor, she said. By noon, word had spread through the hospital. Nurses whispered in hallways. Orderlies passed knowing glances. In the cafeteria, staff traded stories of patients they'd seen dismissed or belittled by Hensley. In Amara's room, flowers began to arrive, nurses, doctors, even janitors stopping by to apologize or offer quiet support. Are you okay, honey? One nurse asked gently. Amara nodded. I think so. But I still don't get it. Why would he hate me? He doesn't even know me. Vanessa sat beside her. That's the thing, Amara. He doesn't have to know you to decide he doesn't like you. That's what prejudice is. It's a shortcut for people who are too lazy or too afraid to see the truth. Amara was quiet for a moment. So, did we win? Vanessa looked at her daughter's bruised temple, at the strength in her eyes despite the hurt. We didn't win, she said softly. But we didn't lose, either. And sometimes, that's how change starts. By the time Amara was discharged later that afternoon, the story had already started leaking beyond the hospital walls. It began with a single post from a nurse's private social media account. No names, no photos, just a brief, furious paragraph about a doctor insulting a black teen in the ER and the unexpected fallout when he learned who her family was. Within hours, staff in other departments were quietly sharing the post. A local journalist caught wind of it, sending Vanessa a cautious but direct email. I've heard something troubling happened at the hospital yesterday involving your daughter. Would you be willing to talk? Vanessa read it twice, her instinct warring between privacy and justice. She had never sought the spotlight. Her donations came without fanfare. Her work was usually done behind the scenes. But this was different. This wasn't about her. This was about every patient who had walked into that hospital and been treated as less than. Mom, Amara said from the couch, a blanket draped around her shoulders. You should say something. If you don't, he's just going to get away with it next time. Vanessa looked at her daughter, still pale, still tired, but speaking with a quiet conviction. You're sure? Amara nodded. Yeah, but if you're going to tell the story, tell all of it. Not just because of me. For the others. Vanessa picked up the phone. 2 days later, the headline hit the front page of the Detroit Chronicle. Hospital under fire after donor's daughter faces racial bias in ER. The article was meticulous. It detailed Amara's accident, the treatment she received, the doctor's remarks, and his abrupt suspension. It included quotes from anonymous staff members, nurses, technicians, even a junior resident who spoke of a pattern of behavior that had been whispered about for years but never addressed. Vanessa hadn't expected the flood of emails and messages that followed. Some came from strangers across the country, sharing their own ER horror stories. Others came from community leaders, clergy, and civil rights advocates offering support. And then came the letter from the hospital board, requesting an urgent meeting. The boardroom was glossy wood and glass, a place where millions of dollars in decisions were made over cups of dark roast coffee. Vanessa sat at the long table with Eleanor beside her. Across from them, the hospital CEO, Richard Paxton, folded his hands. Vanessa, he began, let me first say how deeply sorry we are for what happened to your daughter. I'm not here for an apology, Vanessa said evenly. I'm here for change. Paxton exchanged a look with Eleanor. We've launched a formal investigation into Dr. Hensley's conduct. I'm aware, Vanessa cut in. But one doctor isn't the whole problem. If he was comfortable enough to say those things in front of staff and patients, it's because he didn't think there would be consequences. That's a culture problem, Richard. And culture starts at the top. The CEO shifted in his chair. What do you propose? Vanessa slid a folder across the table. Inside was a 10-page document outlining mandatory bias training, patient advocacy programs, an anonymous reporting hotline, and a community oversight committee with the authority to review patient complaints. Paxton glanced through it, eyebrows lifting. This is ambitious. It's necessary, Vanessa said. And I'll make it simple for you. My foundation's next round of funding is contingent on these changes being implemented. Silence. Eleanor leaned in. She's serious, Richard. And frankly, so am I. Paxton closed the folder slowly. I'll take it to the board. You'll do more than that, Vanessa said, her voice soft but razor-sharp. You'll start now. While the hospital wrestled with its internal reckoning, Amara found herself thrust into a role she never expected. A local youth advocacy group reached out, asking if she would speak at their upcoming forum on racial justice in healthcare. Me? She said when Vanessa showed her the email. I'm just a kid. You're a kid who saw the problem up close, Vanessa said. And you're a kid who didn't stay silent. Amara hesitated. What if I mess up? What if I freeze? Vanessa smiled. Then you'll keep going. Because this isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. The night of the forum, the community center was packed. Folding chairs lined the walls, and the scent of strong coffee and baked goods floated from a table near the door. Amara sat in the front row, hands damp, heart racing. When her name was called, she stepped up to the podium, the microphone squealing briefly before settling. "Hi," she began, her voice wavering just enough to show the weight of the moment. "I'm Amara Wright. A couple weeks ago, I went to the emergency room after getting hit by a car. But that's not the part of the story I'm here to tell. The part I want to talk about is what happened after I walked in." She told them about the assumptions, the dismissive tone, the way the doctor's words felt heavier than the pain in her head. She told them how her mom had stayed calm, how she had waited for the right moment to speak. And she told them why they were all in that room together, because silence protects no one except the people doing the harm. By the time she finished, the applause was loud and long. Back at the hospital, things began to shift. The new bias training was rolled out. Anonymous reports started trickling in, some about rude remarks, others about bigger issues. For the first time, staff felt like someone was actually listening. Dr. Hensley's case was still pending review, but his absence was noticeable. The ER felt lighter. Patients were greeted differently. Nurses said they felt freer to advocate without fear of being shut down. One afternoon, Emily found Vanessa in the hospital lobby. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "Not just for what you did for Amara, but for everyone." Vanessa smiled. "This wasn't just me. It was all of you who spoke up. Change doesn't happen because one person demands it. It happens because enough people refuse to accept anything less." But the story didn't end with policy changes or speeches. It ended weeks later, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, when Amara returned to the hospital not as a patient, but as a volunteer. She stood at the front desk of the pediatric wing, helping a little boy choose a stuffed animal from the donation bin. "Which one do you like?" she asked. The boy's eyes lit up at a bright blue dinosaur. She handed it to him, and for the first time since that night in the ER, Amara felt something loosen inside her chest. She had walked back into the place where she'd been hurt and made it better. And that, she thought, was a victory worth keeping. The hearing was held in the hospital's largest conference room, a place usually reserved for annual budget reviews and gala planning. But today, every chair was filled with administrators, legal counsel, and members of the medical review board. At one end of the table sat Dr. Hensley, his once pristine white coat replaced by a dark suit that seemed a size too tight around the shoulders. Vanessa sat in the back row beside Eleanor, her hands folded in her lap. Amara was next to her, chin high, eyes locked on the man who had reduced her to a stereotype with a single sentence. The lead investigator, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses, began. "Dr. Hensley, this hearing is to determine whether your conduct on October 14th constitutes a violation of hospital policy and medical ethics. You have the opportunity to speak in your defense." Hensley cleared his throat. "I've been a physician for over 20 years. My record speaks for itself. I may have been blunt, but my comments were taken out of context. I treat all patients equally." A low murmur rippled through the room. The investigator turned to a stack of papers. "We've collected testimony from staff who were present that evening. Multiple witnesses corroborated that you made disparaging remarks referencing the patient's race, assumed criminal behavior without evidence, and suggested withholding diagnostic testing based on presumed inability to pay." Hensley's jaw tightened. "That's not how it happened." Then they called Emily. The nurse's voice was steady as she recounted the scene, every detail sharp. She spoke not only of Amara's case, but of other moments, smaller, quieter cuts she'd witnessed over the years. When she finished, the investigator looked at Hensley. "Do you dispute her account?" "I think people are overreacting," Hensley said, his voice tinged with a bitterness that made Vanessa almost pity him. Almost. Finally, the investigator turned to Vanessa. "Mrs. Wright, would you like to make a statement?" She stood slowly, the room falling silent. "I'm here as a mother, and as a donor, and as someone who believes this hospital can be better than it was that night." She glanced at Amara, then back to the panel. "My daughter came here for care. Instead, she was met with contempt. If I hadn't had the resources, the connections, the name, would anyone have listened? How many families have walked out of here feeling the same sting, but with no one to speak for them?" She let the question hang in the air. "This isn't about punishing one man. It's about making sure this never happens again. To anyone." When she sat down, Amara reached for her hand and squeezed. The board deliberated for 40 minutes. When they returned, the decision was read aloud. "Dr. Hensley, the committee finds that your conduct was in violation of hospital policy and medical ethics. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Furthermore, The board will report this incident to the State Medical Licensing Authority for review. There was no applause, no outward celebration, just the quiet satisfaction of accountability. Hensley gathered his papers with trembling hands and left the room without looking back. In the weeks that followed, the hospital's transformation began to take root. The bias training Vanessa had proposed was made mandatory for all staff, from surgeons to janitors. The anonymous hotline received reports that, for the first time, were actually acted upon. The Community Oversight Committee was established, and Vanessa was asked to serve as its first chair. She accepted, but with a condition. "I want a youth representative on the committee," she told the board. "Someone who can speak for the next generation of patients." They agreed, and Vanessa already knew who she would recommend. When the invitation came, Amara almost laughed. "Me? Mom, I'm not. I don't know enough about this stuff." "You know exactly enough," Vanessa said. "You know what it feels like to be on the other side of that desk. You know what it's like to be silenced and to speak anyway." So Amara joined. At first, she was quiet in meetings, listening more than speaking. But slowly, her voice grew stronger. She suggested a mentorship program for medical students from underrepresented backgrounds. She helped draft a patient bill of rights written in plain language. And every time someone tried to gloss over an uncomfortable truth, she leaned forward and said, "Let's not skip that part." Months later, the hospital held its annual gala. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne flutes clinked, and a string quartet played in the corner. Vanessa had been asked to give the keynote address, but she had a different idea. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said into the microphone, "tonight, I'd like to introduce someone whose courage has already changed this hospital more than any donation ever could. My daughter, Amara." There was a polite ripple of applause as Amara walked up, but it grew louder when she began to speak. "I used to think hospitals were just about medicine," she said. "But now I know they're about people, and how we treat each other matters as much as any treatment we give. I don't want anyone to remember me as the donor's kid who got insulted in the ER. I want them to remember me as the person who made sure it didn't happen to the next kid." The applause that followed was not polite. It was fierce. After the gala, as they stood outside under the cool night air, Amara looked at her mom. "Do you think it's really changing? Or are they just pretending because we made a scene?" Vanessa smiled faintly. "Change is slow, baby. But it's happening. And sometimes, making a scene is exactly what it takes." They stood there for a moment. The lights of the city spread out before them, the hum of conversation and laughter drifting from the ballroom behind. Amara took a deep breath. For the first time since that night in the ER, she didn't feel like just a patient or a victim. She felt like someone with a voice and a place to use it. And she intended to. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.